15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10.
Good afternoon and welcome to the AfOx Graduate Admissions Q&A. Thank you for joining us, and for those who registered beforehand, thank you for sending in your questions. I think our panelists are very much looking forward to giving you the answers to your questions. So just to introduce myself and the Africa Oxford Initiative, for those of you who aren't familiar with the platform, AfOx is a cross-university platform which aims to facilitate equitable research collaborations between researchers based in Oxford and researchers based in African institutions. AfOx also has programs to support both students who are currently studying in Oxford, as well as Africans who are interested in applying to Oxford. And that is why we are hosting this event today. So my name is Maura. I work as the Student Engagement Liaison at AfOx, and I'm also currently a third-year D4 student in Human Geography. Before we begin, I will ask each panelist to introduce themselves, and I think I'll just call on panelists as they appear on my screen. So Prichista, will you please introduce yourself?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Prichista Ariana, and I direct the Master's Program in International Health and Tropical Medicine based in the Nuffield Department of Medicine here in Oxford. Welcome.
Katrina.
I'm Katrina Charles. I'm Associate Professor in Geography in the Geography Department, so that's in the Social Sciences Division. I'm the Academic Director for a Master's in Water Science Policy and Management, and I'm a Fellow of Reuben College.
Katrina. Lessa. Oh, you're muted, Lessa.
Hi everyone, my name is Lessa and I'm a first year D4 student and also working as an African Universities Ambassador for Zoology Department.
Brilliant. Nick.
Hi, so I'm Nick. I'm from the University's Graduate Admissions Office. So we process all our applications centrally. They go out to departments for assessment, and we do events like this.
Thank you. Nikki. Oh, Nikki, you're muted.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm from Student Fees and Funding. So our team looks after Oxford's Central Graduate Scholarships, as well as administering the fees for all courses.
Thank you, Nikki. And Simpande.
Good afternoon. My name is Simpande. I am a recent Oxford graduate. I completed the Masters in World Literatures in English, based in the English department. And I'm also working as the Communications Officer for the Africa Oxford Initiative.
Brilliant, thank you. So unfortunately, one of our panelists couldn't join us immediately, but we're hoping to have Emeka, who's currently the Vice President of the Africa Society and also doing a DPhil in engineering. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. Before we do though, I would just like to point out that we may not be able to answer all of your questions today. However, we will be providing resources where you can have a look at the admissions Q&As that we've done in the past, as well as providing other links that you might find useful. So I think first we'll go ahead with some of the more kind of technical questions about applications. And so Nick, I think the first question is, we had quite a lot of questions, people asking what are the prerequisites for X program, but of course there's so many programs and you can't know the specific requirements for each one of them. So what advice would you give to people about how to get started and how to navigate the application portal and so on?
So basically, the best place to start to look first is the graduate admissions website. We have a courses A to Z, and every course has entry requirements listed there, which the department writes themselves. So it will give you an idea of the minimum entry requirements for the course. Any other scores you have to send with your application, the English proficiency level, and all that sort of thing on there. The university, normally the minimum across all of our courses is usually a strong 2-1. But for some courses, it can be higher. For some courses, it can be the equivalent of a first-class degree in the UK. We also have a page on international qualifications, it doesn't have every country, that has the countries that we receive the most applications from. We have a rough equivalent to that strong 2-1 into that first, which is just for your reference to give you a general idea about whether your qualification is sort of in the area of those standards. So that's definitely the best place to start looking. Once you've read the course information, you'll find on the last tab is how to apply, and there's a link there that will take you straight through to our application portal, and that will pre-fill the course that you're applying to for you as well. So yeah, that's definitely the best place to get started.
Great. 2 follow-up questions. First on the English proficiency. So we had a question about, can I apply to Oxford without an English certificate?
Now you definitely can. You'll see that if you do already have your IELTS, your TOEFL, there's space in the application form to put that. You can apply without it, but if you do and you're made an offer, it will be conditional on you obtaining those results. Basically, so before you can enroll at the university, so it will be a condition of your offer, unless you are applying for a waiver of the English language proficiency requirement. There's details in the application guide on the basis that you can apply for a waiver. That's something the department will consider at the same time as your application. But you can, at the point of application, apply without scores if you don't have them yet. Perhaps you've got a test coming up. So I would say that you should be very confident that you could get those scores. You should, because obviously, as I said, since it will be a condition, you should be, if you've just taken the test and you haven't got near the university's requirements, it's really important to be confident you could get those if you were offered a place.
And on the general requirement for a 2-1, although it differs across programs, and I think if Katrina and Prachista could give their perspectives on this as well, is someone said, how strict is kind of the GPA or grade requirement? And I think for people who are applying from countries that aren't kind of represented on the list of how to convert their grades, do you have any advice for how they can kind of judge their grades, maybe if they're marked differently?
Sure, and it can be quite difficult. If you look at, there are some organizations that will give information about rough, for example, it used to be called NARIC, you may see it referred to as that, but UK ENIC, ENIC, do a statements of comparability if you need to know before you apply, if you've got just a general interest in how your qualification compares. You can also speak to the department and see if they can advise based on that previous applicants from that country. They may not always be able to, but it's something you can ask. But yeah, I think that's the best way of assessing your own. So I think there was 2 parts to the question. I've forgotten the first part. Sorry.
The first part was just about how strict the GPA or the grade is, and what are the chances of someone getting admission if they have maybe a lower score than
So for example, if there is a GPA on there and it's say 3.5 and you've got 3.4, but remember that those scores, they are minimum entry requirements. So it is often the case that the average standard of applicants will be higher. But if you have extenuating circumstances, there's a way of reporting those when you apply, and there's a separate form if you've got sensitive extenuating circumstances. So perhaps you've had an illness or a bereavement, for example, something that's really affected your study. And particularly if that's something that your referees would be able to speak to in their references, in terms of how that might have affected your attainment, then in that kind of situation, you don't necessarily have to be exactly at that level. But I think in the majority of cases, you should have that GPA to apply. It's not absolutely, your application there's no automated sifting process in central graduate admissions. That means it will just be put in a different pile or anything like that. It will also be considered on its merits. Obviously, every application is a big investment of your time as an applicant. It takes a lot of time to put together, and so you want to be submitting a competitive application when you put all that work and all that emotion into it.
Yes, I think Prachista and Katrina, I wonder whether you might want to say anything about how, when you're adjudicating applications, how you consider grades in relation to the other aspects of the application.
Yes,
just trying to unmute.
I'm trying to find the microphone. Yes. So We do look at applications holistically. So it's not just about the grades. It's about what the work experience has been. For some candidates, it may be that they have been out of school for quite some time and have gained other kinds of experiences along the way. So we do suggest that, of course, it is a very competitive process and a lot of applicants do have very good marks. But I think aside from what was mentioned about extenuating circumstances, it's also about the experience that you've had and what you've done with the education that you've had so far that would make a difference. It is very much program specific. So some programs may be more attentive to marks than other programs. And that may be because they require a certain baseline of foundational knowledge that would determine whether or not the candidate would succeed in that program. But others may be more flexible with respect to that, given the experience.
Yeah, I would echo that and just say that it's about looking at the grades is about understanding your capability and whether you're going to thrive at Oxford. And so as Prachista's highlighted, there's lots of other ways you can show that, but certainly if your marks are not above that threshold, it's useful for us to know how you might explain that. So as Nick was explaining, you've got extenuating circumstances, but also as Prachista was saying, it's about your experience as well. And so what is it that we should know that shows that you're capable?
I think going back to Nick, someone has asked, is it possible to apply for graduate study at Oxford if I cannot produce original transcripts because of my displacement and legal challenges to get it?
I saw that question in advance. It's a very interesting question. Obviously, it is exactly what you need to do is a little bit case by case. It depends on whether you've got any contact with your previous institution. And also, the first thing I would consider doing is you don't necessarily need what your institution considers to be an official transcript to apply. We do accept, there's a good description in the application guide of what a transcript has to comprise. But for example, we'd accept a screenshot of student self-service as long as it's got the correct information on it. Do be careful with that. We have had people, if you accidentally omit like your name, for example, but it's got your grades on it, which can be common with student self-service, that is a problem. But we do get lots and lots of electronic and self-service screenshot transcripts, especially at the point of application. I mean, later on, you may need, I think basically some rules have been slightly adjusted because of COVID, apart from anything, in terms of what you have to submit to fulfill the conditions of your offer later on. But at the point of applying, especially, so there's lots of acceptable formats of transcript, just make sure it meets the requirements in the application guide. If you don't have that, then the usual process, if you can't get a transcript from your institution, is if you've got written confirmation from your institution that they can't produce it and why they can't produce it, then you can upload that to your application as a transcript. Obviously, that's a little bit, it helps to have your transcript, obviously, for assessors because they're looking at your grades. It's ideal if you do have grading documents, but we do accept that as long as it's clearly from your institution. And so that states reasons and any details they can provide about your course. You'll see that I've just outlined that policy that is written down in the application guide if you want to double check what I'm saying. But if you have, and again, if you don't have that either because you've had serious problems, perhaps you're a refugee, you've been displaced, as the question asked, then please get in touch with the graduate admissions office as early as you can. And if you have said something that approaches a transcript or written confirmation, then send that with your query, just so we can check into it and help you out with that. But it's not as uncommon a situation as you might think. There is a refugee scholarship at Oxford. There's the Oxford Refugee Scholarship. We do have applicants who've come from similar circumstances. And we do have ways to help you and ways to deal with that. So just get in touch with us as early as you can so we can help you.
Thank you, Nick. So I guess the next question is, when is the appropriate time to start applying to Oxford? And I think in addition to that, I wondered whether you might be able to kind of speak on I think in the health sciences, they've moved the application dates forward to December as well.
Yes, so definitely, if you're wanting to start your course next year, the best time to apply is right now. In previous years, the deadlines for funding have been in January. basically every individual course has got its own. Well, we have three different university standard deadlines that can be used when you're applying for funding. Well, the course can use when for funding. So they used to just be in January. So your course would either have used an early or a late January deadline. But this year there has been, as you say, a major change, and a lot of courses, particularly many medical sciences, are using a deadline at the very start of December. So that's a big move forward if you'd been sort of looking last year at their website and trying to sort of gauge when to start. So yes, basically starting now is absolutely the best time. If you're watching, I'm sure people watching this are ready, but really as early in the application period as possible. If you're wanting to apply in future years, we normally open admissions in September of the year before you'd be starting. So if you wanted to be applying for 2023, 24, then it would be next September you'd be looking.
Great.
And if I could just add to that, if you're looking at a DPhil in particular, you really should be trying to start those conversations with potential supervisors a year in advance. So it's not just about making the application, but it's about starting those conversations, working out which supervisors are a good fit for you, as well as who you might like to work with. And then, starting those conversations so that by the time you do the application, you've already had several conversations, you've already had some feedback on your ideas.
Great, thank you for bringing that up, Katrina. And I think later we'll come back to how to contact supervisors as well. But I thought Zimpande and Lessa, can you tell us a little bit more about your own process about when you decided to apply to Oxford and whether you have any advice about timing?
So I can go first. So basically I started looking up for, as Katrina is saying, I started looking up for supervisors who I thought I would want to work with. And I started reading their bios and reading their papers, especially those that I knew my area and I knew what I wanted to do. I had a pretty good idea, not exactly what I wanted, but a pretty good idea. And I started searching for those people in that area and I started contacting them. That was, I think, a year in advance. That was a year before I applied. And then that gave me the opportunity of coming here. I came here for like a month and we met. It was pre-COVID, so we met. And then I was able to have a pretty good idea of how Oxford works. And then by the time I was applying, I actually did my application while I was on my visit here. Then later on, I got in. So as I just want to echo with Katrina that especially if you're applying for DPhil, some supervisors want to build a relationship with you before they can accept to work with you. Because you have to have a good fit. You need to know if you can work, because PhD is a very long time to be working together. And that's a very good idea. Yeah. So I did, just to wrap it up, I did apply a year after my conversations with my supervisor. I mean, few months. So I came here in November and I applied in December for January and I was taken in February. Yeah.
I will also second the point on the importance of building a relationship. So I was applying for a one-year master's program. So I think you can get away with maybe sending in your application with, not thinking about it with the benefit of a whole year. But the way I'd approached it is that it was, I was fortunate in that I applied for some student research jobs. And one of the professors, I was at the University of Cape Town, and one of the professors was from here, the English department here in Oxford. And through working together and in a sense, I suppose, indicating my ability to be accountable, and then also to be able to field particular questions that were targeted at her research, and then also in certain ways in which I was thinking our ideas were relating to one another. And through maintaining that relationship, I found that it was very useful even for her to give me advice as to how to work on a compelling, successful application. So I will just, time is very important. Give yourself enough time to be able to do a great job. But then also as well, sending out those emails to professors and then speaking to them, showing an interest in their scholarship, speaking about the ideas you would like to explore and how you possibly could work together in a symbiotic manner. So relationships for me I think was one of the most primary.
Thank you.
Laura, could I just add one line to that, is that I do think it's important for particularly one-year master programs, but other master's program is that you do try to find who are the alumni of that program to get a better sense of if that's the best fit program for you. And I think the alumni would have the best perspective on whether, the program provides what it looks like it provides on the website.
Sure. I'll just add to that I've had, if people have this information on, say, their LinkedIn profiles, I've had people approach me from there, and I'm always happy to answer questions. And I know that quite a few people are as well. So if you kind of cold message people on LinkedIn, they're more than likely happy to respond. So other questions that we got were basically about either whether people were able to, if they needed to do an MPhil first before they could do a DPhil in Oxford, or if they were able to apply in a maybe subject or a discipline that they don't have previous academic experience in before. So I think, Nick, I don't know if you could speak to that from a kind of admissions or technical perspective. And then I wonder whether Katrina and Prachista could give us a perspective, based on how the application would be judged.
I imagine that to some extent, so the entry requirements vary between courses, and the exactly what department's looking for varies between courses. But you certainly don't have to have an Oxford MPhil to apply to a DPhil. That there are obviously a lot of Oxford MPhil students who stay on to do DPhils at Oxford, because obviously an MPhil being a 2-year course, and normally has the first year is similar to a 1-year taught masters, and the second year there's normally a strong research component. So that often it doesn't always turn into your into your PhD thesis, but it often does form a good basis for a PhD thesis. So I mean, there's a lot of people that do go from Oxford MPhil to a DPhil, but you absolutely don't have to have an Oxford master's to do a PhD at Oxford. That's absolutely not the case. And so after MPhil and DPhil, what was your second question?
So I think the question was, if someone was if someone was coming from a public health background, would they be able to do a DPhil in one of the sciences?
Right, and generally about moving subject areas. Yes. I mean, whether or not, basically, I think that's very course specific. Some courses really require you to have qualifications that are exactly in that area. And some courses are willing to consider applicants with broader but usually related experience, especially the case in some social sciences courses. So I think that there can be perceived to be more overlap in social sciences, perhaps. But there are definitely some social sciences courses where there's no undergraduate subject specified, but of course they're still going to be looking for relevant experience, passion for that particular area in your application. You don't have to have come from there. If you're applying to economics, for example, then you'd need, they specify you have to have done a certain amount of quantitative economics in your background, because that's just an important basis that you need to start the course at the beginning. Otherwise, you wouldn't be at the same level as the other people who are starting at the start of the course. So it's just a skill you have to have from your undergraduate. So it really does vary by course. And the particular question about the public health was, if you had an MPhil in public health, could you apply to a DPhil in one of the other sciences? And again, that does vary, but there are definitely, I've checked through some medical sciences, PhD specific entry requirements for the call, and certainly there are a lot of the DPhil in medical sciences, for example, you need a background in biomedical or scientific study. So that would generally, it depends on the exact content of the course. So this is really something that only the person who asked the question would know. But certainly that seems like that's compatible with having an MPhil in public health, a master's in public health.
Thanks, Prachista.
Yeah, so I think it really depends on the research project that you're applying for. So even within the medical sciences, there are a broad range of research projects that would benefit from different disciplinary backgrounds and experiences and strengths. So it is coming back to that issue of contacting the potential supervisor and having a discussion about the project and the requirements of that project, and whether your qualifications provide you with the foundation necessary. So I wouldn't say it's even departmental issue. I think it is very much a project issue and a supervisor consideration.
Thank you. And I think, Nick, maybe last question is about application fee waivers. So can you tell us a little bit more about how that works, who's eligible for an application fee waiver?
So at the moment, so there's an application fee for graduate courses, but currently still £75 per application. There is a list of the different cases for a waiver of that fee in the application guide, and that includes, there's a list of countries, essentially low-income countries. So students from low-income countries, if you indicate that that's the country you're applying from, that's your normal residence, when you apply, you'll be and that you're basically that there's no further steps to that process. You'll be able to tick that you want, that you wouldn't. There's a statement about a statement about whether that you wouldn't be able to apply unless the fee was waived, and then it's just waived. And so there isn't a lengthy process for that. It's just a tick box in the application form. But so it's quite a list of, I think, about 20 to 30 countries that you can find in the application guide, and there's certainly a decent number of countries from Africa in that list. You can also, if you're applying to related PhD programs, you can also, depending on how they're related, you can sometimes apply for a waiver for further applications after you apply for your first course. So we have some combinations of courses. It's just to make sure that you aren't disadvantaged if your particular subject area is represented in multiple departments and under multiple PhDs. So you can sometimes be advised to apply to more than one PhD. And we also have centers for doctoral training, which are very specific, usually research areas. And if you want to apply for that and the PhD that's for the PhD in geography and the doctoral training center in environmental research, I believe are connected in this way. So that's another way of getting waivers, but that's only for applications after the first one. But there's a full list of all the cases in the application guide. So please do check that and make sure that you're check if you're eligible for a waiver.
Great. Thank you. And I think just to add on to that, so the Oxford University Africa Society has a mentorship scheme for Africans who want to apply to Oxford. So I think there'll be a link in the chat on YouTube, which will take you to the application site. So you submit your details, and then you'll be matched with either a current student or alumni who will help you through the application process. You can talk about your CV, your personal statement. Maybe they'll give you some background about the course itself. And if you apply through that program, the mentorship program, you can also receive an application fee waiver. So if you're not eligible on the university's list, if the country that you're applying from, then you can receive a waiver as well through the mentorship scheme, and that AfOx and AfOx collaborate to be able to make that happen. So they'll send your details over to, I think it's graduate admissions, and when AfOx receives the list, then you'll have kind of a code that you can use to apply. So please do look out for that, and look out for the deadlines of when you can be part of the program and when you will be matched with a mentor, and you can apply through that. So I think then we'll move on to some funding questions, because of course, once you get acceptance, you'll need to pay tuition, living costs and so on. And so glad to have a representative from SFF to answer some of these questions. So Nikki, I think, can you tell us a little bit more about SFF and about scholarships and opportunities that are available to African applicants and how they can find them?
Of course. So we have about 1,000 graduate scholarships available from about 160 different types of schemes. And the scholarships and the funding deadlines go along with the Oxford application. So you have to apply by the relevant course deadline, whether that is the December or the 2 January course deadlines for you to be considered for funding at Oxford. The majority of our scholarships, candidates will be automatically considered for when they apply for their courses. We have a system where we'll have a look at the scholarship eligibility criteria and sift out from all of the graduate applications where students have received an offer, whether it's conditional or unconditional. and we will then use our university panels to make a decision. There are several Oxford scholarships where there is additional applications that are required. Some of those are already listed on the Oxford graduate application. So there are things like Ertegun, OSIS, Oxford Weidenfeldt-Hoffmann. So you will have to then visit those scholarship websites, get the additional application, complete the additional application, and attach it to your Oxford graduate application. The best way to find what scholarships you're eligible for is by going to the Oxford website and going to the fees, funding and scholarship search. You can find that really easily. Once you're on the Oxford graduate website, there is a fees and funding tab, and you drop down the fees, funding and scholarship search is one of the options on there for you. So you can then enter your course, you can enter the country that you are ordinarily resident at, and it will tell you all the scholarships that you're eligible for based on the information that you provide.
Thank you, Nikki. There was also a question about someone's asked, once you have been admitted, is it easier to find funding?
I would absolutely say do not wait to apply for funding. Do not apply just for Oxford funding. We have an external funding web pages that is also part of the fees funding website. While those web pages are not extensive, they don't have every single external scholarship available. We have links to some of the biggest scholarship search providers. So think of them as Google for scholarships. And we have advice on how to reach out to other organizations, so NGOs who might have scholarships. It may be worth having a look to see whether the country that you're resident in has governmental scholarships. Some areas do, so I'm aware of Canada and Mexico. I don't know whether there are African countries as well that have similar research councils where they may like to support African students studying abroad. So it is worth looking at that. Funding, once you're at Oxford, once you're on course, is incredibly limited. Do not wait to look for funding when you get here. Absolutely approach funding something similar to a job search. Do it as soon as you decide to make your Oxford application. If you have any queries, use our FAQs. Do get in touch with Student Fees and Funding. We will guide you through the funding process, but start now or 3 months ago.
Thanks. And I think just to follow up on not waiting, are there any financial requirements or prerequisites that you have to show before you can take up a place at Oxford?
Very few of our scholarships are what we call means tested. So I'm aware of a few scholarships in the law department, and I'm aware of a few partial scholarships. I think they are. Procista might be able to help with medical sciences as a division, but the majority of our scholarships are based on merit. So scholarships like Clarendon, scholarships like Oxford, Weidenfeldt-Hoffmann will predominantly look at who you are, what you want to do, how that fits with the scholarship aims and the donor's aims. So that is that's how most of the decisions are made.
Thank you. I think if those were all the questions that we received on funding. If there's anything that anyone else wants to add, you can jump in. I think otherwise we'll move on to the questions about the applications, personal statements, and so on. So I think the first question is about what is the best way to present an academic CV?
I don't think there's any one way to present a CV, but I think having as much information in as little pages as you can is better. So being succinct, in other words, is much better. It is evident when people try to fill it up and add pages and make it look like they're doing a lot more, but it's more the quality of what's there rather than the quantity of what's there. I definitely would have included there your education. So what institutions you've had your education, and provide as much detail as possible on that, but not too much. So what was your degree in, and what was your ranking or your mark that you received in that? So the institution, your degree, and your marks, and also have any employment that you have undertaken included in that, and any volunteer experience that you have been involved with. I think those are probably, and publications, if you have them, are probably the more relevant elements to include. I wouldn't put, with respect to the publications, I don't think saying everywhere you've ever presented anything or any abstract you've provided everywhere is not very useful for those reviewing the applications. So again, being as succinct as possible, but being aware of the things that are going to be relevant for us who are reviewing the applications are what I listed. But Katrina?
Yeah, I think I'd emphasize, so look for your course, look at what they're saying the assessors are looking for. So certainly for us, academic track record is so important. So that's the first thing we look for. So having that first in the CV, very helpful. But so if you can see what they've listed there, make sure the relevant things for your course are what's in your CV.
Thank you. And I think, so there are two questions for people who've been out of education for a couple of years and maybe working. So the first is about how do you use that work experience in writing your personal statement, or maybe, how can you use that for your proposal if you're applying for a DPhil? And the other thing is, the other point was about references, and whether references from work are acceptable if you've been out of school for a while.
So the different courses will list what they find acceptable or what they would accept by way of references and where they should come from. Not only DPhils, but our master's course in International Health and Tropical Medicine, for example, does ask for work experience. So that's a requirement for our masters. So that's definitely relevant to be integrated into the statement. As I say, other courses are going to be different. And as Katrina points out, you have to be very careful to read through what the requirements are for the particular course and make sure your statement addresses that, whether or not that does integrate your work experience. I think it would be quite amiss to have the work experience that you think is relevant and not integrate how it is relevant into the statement. So I would emphasize the need for that. And again, with references, it depends on the requirement of the course. Some courses will very much appreciate having references from employers, because that speaks to not only your academic potential, but also what you have done outside of academia, which is very useful for how you would be able to progress on the course.
Yeah, so for our courses, we don't have work experience as a prerequisite like Pratistas do, but we still do look upon it very favorably. We still, so I think absolutely you should be using it across your application to demonstrate why you're a good fit for the course. So demonstrate how it aligns with your passion for the subject, how it shows your capability and all you've been able to achieve in your work experience as well. From our perspective, where work experience, work-related references are good, but we still require certainly at least one, if not two, academic references. So they're still really important, even if you have been out for a while. It doesn't mean if you can't get them, we're not going to look at it, but we really do prefer to have some at least.
And if I could just explain that, that's because you're coming back into academia. So it's really useful for us to have a point of reference of how you performed within an academic context that would complement then how you performed in a professional context, which are different and complementary.
Thank you. I think, question for Patricia and Katrina is what you look for. I mean, besides work experience, which we've just discussed, in a personal statement, in a really good personal statement. And for Zimpande and Lesa, can you also tell us more about how you approached writing your personal statement and what advice you would have for applicants?
What we look for in personal statements is, again, very relative to what the programs are about. So what we look for in the personal statement is how well the interests of the candidate align with what the programs have on offer, because it is about matching and it's about ensuring that it's the right fit for a candidate, that the program is offering what it is the candidate is looking for. And the candidate has demonstrated that not only with their academic work, but with the things that they have done outside of academia, that they exhibit the qualities that the particular course is looking for in their students. Katrina?
Yeah, so I mean, I think from our side, we see that the personal statement is one thing we're assessing on, but it's across a portfolio. So it's not the only thing by any means. And I think one of the questions I've seen was about how to make it outstanding. And I don't think that's what you need to be thinking about it in terms of, because it is a portfolio you're trying to submit. I think one of the things I'm looking for is, what are you going to do with the degree? Why is it important to you? So that's coming back to your passions and how it's going to shift your career and really help you to take the next steps as well.
What we certainly don't want to see is a replication of your CV, which is already available to us. So it ought to be something that goes beyond what is listed already in other parts of your application.
I think Zimpande, can we start with you? Tell us about your personal statement. And I think Lesa, because you're doing the D4, tell us a little bit more about how you approached writing your proposal.
I think it's also always useful to remember that when you are completing these documents, you're not meant to do them in total isolation. So if you have the benefit of being part of an academic department, your professors, whom themselves have gone through the process of not only writing academic statements in their time, but reviewing academic statements. So working with a mentor, sending drafts back and forth, for me was very useful. It was also useful, going back to Prachista's point, that if you have a document in which you're trying to fit in as much information as possible, you have to be quite succinct. And you have to ensure that everything that you're including into that document really is appropriate for the program that you're applying for. So for me, what was useful was working with academics who then also helped me to always be very considerate of even the tone and register of this document, because in a sense, it's also an academic document, as I'm understanding it at least. So also writing in that tone was useful to really make it suited for the program in a way that was academic and professional, and including as well my research interests, ideas, and what I would like to explore and what I'm envisioning this would do for my career later on. So the big thing for me is academics who are there to support and help you. That's a great resource.
Lesa?
Okay, so I would just put a little bit of experience or some information regarding how I did my preparing your proposal. But then firstly, I would like to agree with what Kwame has just said about using the academic resource that you have. And what I would say is, if you're applying for a DPhil, or if you're thinking of applying for a DPhil, I would say the preparation will be as good as your application. Don't just think about, I want to apply for a DPhil, let me just fill in the forms and things like that. You need time. You need time to prepare. You need time to put together who do you want to work with in terms of supervisor. You approach them and you build a relationship with them. And sometimes if you're lucky, you put your proposal, because everyone is going, most of them actually, they would ask you, or they would ask to know if you have an idea of what you want to work with or what you want to work on. And at least you should have prepared at least a 2-page or a 1-page summary of what you want to do. And if you put in time in terms of preparation or in terms of writing to your professors, if you're lucky enough, some professors are actually open to looking at your work and actually editing or reviewing some of the things that you have written, which I think is very good and productive, and many people are open for that. One thing I would say though is that when you're looking for professors that you want to work with in your DPhil, as you're writing that email, there are a couple of things that you need to keep in mind. You need to know they're very busy people, and then they don't have time. And as concise as you should be in your email, you should also make sure that you put in your attributes, your skills. You have to make sure, most of these people are receiving 10 students application or 100 students applications to be the supervisor. So what will make your email stand out that they would want to reply, because they have so many emails to reply. So think about it in that way. Write that email that it's going to prompt them to reply to you and to think about, to even invest their time in you. And one thing that I've learned also is that sometimes you may apply and you get that offer. If that professor really wants to work with you and you don't have a scholarship, they will be able to help you and access those resources. That's what happened to me. I had a scholarship like that was providing half of the funding, but because I had developed a relationship with my supervisor, she was actually the one who helped me to get the rest of the funding, which I think it's something that you need to start thinking before you just go ahead and start applying and filling the forms. I would say invest in the preparation, invest in the writing. Don't just write one thing and send it there. If you have peers, have them look at the document that you have, and then it really pays to have a fresh pair of eyes to look at your document before you send to the supervisor, because you don't know them and you don't know what they'll be going through the time they're opening your emails. Make it count. You only just have that chance to make an impression. I would say you have to make it count, and you can only do that if you have enough time to prepare. So your preparation will be as good as your application. That's what I would say.
Thank you. I think you've touched on a question that I wanted to ask next, is about how to contact supervisors, how to build that relationship practically. So I think, I don't know if Patricia or Katrina, you have any advice. I'm sure people have reached out to you, about how you would want potential students to contact you.
Yeah, I think don't write too much, I think would be in an email. So oftentimes I receive emails that are very long and are a personal statement in and of themselves, plus an attachment or two. And I think you have to appreciate that as much as we would like to read all of those, it is very difficult with busy schedules. So my advice would be to keep it to a page. If you have to scroll, then maybe you shouldn't put that in there. So keep it, and as Lessa was saying, to attract the attention. What is it about you that I should know more about? Why should I read? And to demonstrate that you have done the research. Sometimes you get emails that is a copy and paste sent to 15 other professors. So it doesn't feel like it's really somebody who has taken the time to know that they want to work with you. And these are the reasons why, that they've just shotgun approach and send it to everybody and anybody they could find an email for. So I think take the time, as Lessa says, and really think about and do the research about the particular professor you want to work with, and express what it is that you want to do. And as Katrina keeps pointing to, what is your passion, and why is it that we should want to work with you or learn more about you? I think asking for a conversation is really good, because having that virtual meeting is a very good way for mutually being able to determine whether it's a good fit. And finding the right supervisor is very much about having as much a personality alignment as it is about the topical alignment.
Yeah, I would add to that yeah, do email and reach out to someone. If they don't reply, email them again, give them a week or two to reply. After that, you might have to leave it. That's probably as many as you can do. But in terms of what to include in that email, yes, a CV that gives us enough information to help you, to advise you if we think academically you're a good fit for the department and our work, and if we're interested in proceeding with it. And then the other one would be, if you're looking at a DPhil, what are you passionate about working on? What is it that you really want to research? Because then we generally don't have DPhil topics sitting here waiting on the shelf. That's not how we work. We want you to develop your own proposal about what you're interested in. And so it helps us to know enough about you to say, okay, you're interested in these things. This is the kind of area where my lab's working. These are the kind of things where I think you'd fit really well, and we could push you in this direction and really meet your needs in these passions that you have.
But I would say as well, to demonstrate what you have done to realize that passion. So a lot of people are passionate about a lot of things, but they don't do very much about it. And what stands out is when a candidate has really demonstrated that they've tried lots of things, they've gone out there and they've done this, that, and the other that aligns with their passion. So it's not just saying you're passionate, but it's showing how you have exhibited that passion and really followed through with it. Can I just add to what Lessa had said about the scholarship? Because I think sometimes people will expect the supervisor to find funding, and that's a bit risky, because as was mentioned, graduate scholarships are really, really competitive and very hard to find. And we have had cases where we give an offer and students are very disappointed, and even more so, and they say, I wish I hadn't gotten an offer because I got an offer and no funding. So it is important to recognize, unlike some universities in other countries, that within Oxford, having an offer does not necessarily mean it automatically comes with funding. So as has been stressed, I think it is very important to start your search for scholarships very early, and don't expect that a supervisor is going to be able to find that funding for you, or that the university is going to be able to have funding that's suitable for you and competitive.
If I can add some extra points on there too, just to say that one of the other options, rather than approaching the supervisor, is to approach their current students, to understand, to get to know more about that supervisor and see, are those students satisfied? Would they recommend them to you? That's very useful. And the other thing to be aware of, though, is that the supervisor can support you through the process, but they're not the decision maker. So they won't be making the decision on whether you're admitted or not. That will go to the department. They'll make a recommendation, but they won't make the decision.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a very important point. I think staying with you, Katrina, also looking that we're running out of time, I think we should talk about colleges. And I was wondering, Katrina, if you could please explain what colleges are and how they fit into the university system, and why they're kind of how they fit into students' lives.
Right. For graduate students, colleges, I find that a really difficult question to answer, actually, because some graduates have quite a close relationship with their colleges and others won't. You don't even need to specify a college in your application. You, as a graduate, you will be admitted by your department, not by a college. But colleges provide a lot of the social life of the university. They may provide accommodation. They'll provide food at times. They'll provide where sports are often held, like your sports team will be your college sports team. And so there's more of a social life, I guess, in the college.
Great. I think Zimpande, maybe a question for you is, what do you think someone should consider when choosing a college, and your experience, and what did you think about in choosing college?
Well, I think, especially amongst younger people, what you find more alluring is the idea of, oh, which is the most prestigious college, which is the oldest college, which college, where were they shooting Harry Potter? But I think you have to, you be a bit more mature about how you're thinking about, which college will be your best academic home for you whilst you're in Oxford. It's useful that your subject also, in a sense, limits, it pre-selects the colleges which are offering that course itself. But I think in the initial research that you would have done, perhaps some of the professors whom you would have contacted earlier, the particular colleges that they're in, that perhaps may be a college that is more conducive for you, because you're also wanting a place where you have a sense of some social support, and a college that is staffed with the professors whom are going to provide the best tutoring for you in that way. So I think it selects for you depending on the course that you're choosing. And then also, secondly, the people who are going to be there, who will make your aspect of living here in Oxford also just as enjoyable. And so that is really what I would add.
Can
Yeah,
I add something, sorry, that's sort of funding related as well? So some colleges will actually have independent funding. So while fees and funding looks at central funding, there will be colleges that will also have funding. So do go to the college specific web pages to look at funding. The other thing to mention is don't necessarily get attached to your college when you first get offered one, because there is again funding that is linked to colleges. So if you want to have full funding, you may be asked to move from the original college that you were placed in to a new college. A big example again, Oxford, Weidenfeld and Hoffman have college partnerships, so you may end up moving to one of their colleges. Oxford Kobe is something that is focused on, let's say, St. Catherine's College. So there is a funding aspect to colleges as well, and it is worth having a look at what colleges are funded and whether they are college partnerships for some of the scholarships that you may be interested in applying.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo with what Nick has just actually said. I think it's a pretty good idea for you to also make, if you have the time and if you can, make an investment of knowing the colleges and what they do and what they are, because they come with very, very important aspects, as Katrina said, your social life. So if you're going to be here for like a year, or if you're a DPhil, you're going to be here for like 3 to 4 years, you would want to be in a place that you feel your home. You would want a home away from home if you're not from here. So making an investment in which college you think you can belong to, and also some colleges, as Nick has said, has got research grants. So it will be very important to also look at all those aspects. There's some students, some DPhil students that have families. There's some colleges that are very, very good when it comes to having students with families or student parents, and they can have like family accommodations apart from graduate school accommodations. Some colleges have family accommodations, some colleges have nurseries for the children. So all those aspects are very important to also look at when you're applying, when you're making your application to Oxford.
And there are some graduate-only colleges, and that might be something that you would want to consider or would be important for you.
Okay, thank you all for that. I think, so there was a question here that was asked, and I think I will use that question to kind of close off. So the question was, what are the common mistakes and oversights that happen during the application that one should avoid? So I think we'll go around and I'll give everybody an opportunity to answer that. And then if you could as well, kind of give any last advice or tips that you may have. So if we could start with Nick.
We're actually about to publish an article about the most common mistakes from the graduate admissions perspective. I think that the major ones, one you may not think of is it's really common for people to upload the wrong version of a document. It's just incredibly easy to do. I mean, you probably got different versions for different applications, different universities, you've updated it. So really make sure that you've got the right one, especially if it's after the deadline. It's not actually always possible to change it, depending on what you want to change. If it's just some typos, it may not be possible. So really do check that. And the second thing I say is look through the whole application first. Like, so whenever you start applying, don't just go through it bit by bit, wait for the transcript and put that in, and then sort of move through it. Like check through the whole thing, and so that you know what you're looking for, because some things like a transcript or like some test results, you may need more time to get, like they may just take time to produce. So try and get an overview of the whole thing rather than filling the whole thing in one step at a time.
Great, thanks, Nick. Nikki?
This may surprise you, but read. Really read any communication that comes from the university. Read it carefully. The majority of the time, the questions that arise will actually be answered in what you have. Read the brief, whether it's a funding application, whether it's part of what your department requires for applying for the course. Read it carefully. Don't make assumptions. Never make assumptions. If you're not sure about something, contact the people that are relevant for that piece of documentation you need to provide, whether it's graduate admissions, us, or your department. It's better to email and make sure you have the correct paperwork, as Nick was saying, than just assume, because you may actually make yourself ineligible for funding, or you may, as Nick said, attach the wrong document, and therefore the first impression that you're trying to make that is so good is spoiled. So just read carefully, don't assume, ask questions. There is no such thing as a stupid question.
Thank you, Nikki. We'll move on to Zimpande.
I will just echo what has been repeated quite a lot, that give yourself ample time, yes, just as much time as is possible to be able to do everything that has been mentioned, to thorough reading and going over the documents carefully that you have to upload. So time.
Thank you. Lessa?
I would probably just repeat what others have said, because I would think that would be the common mistake. People are reading, just going ahead and filling the forms just because they just want to apply. But I would say invest your time. If there's any document you have to read, because every applicant, if you're applying to different universities have got different styles, they've got different requirements. Do not assume, read.
Yeah, thank you. Katrina?
Yeah, I was going to comment on the sample of written work. So I think while generally, I think the applications are very, very high standard, one thing to consider is with your written work sample, try to make sure that it's representing a number of things, so that it's showing your engagement with academic literature, showing that you can synthesize knowledge, and that you can present a clear narrative or argument. One of the issues that happens is that people choose a chapter from a longer piece of work without context. And so it makes it hard to see, actually, it might be a chapter where there's not a lot of engagement with academic literature, or there's not a lot of synthesized knowledge, or there's not, that conclusions being drawn. Doesn't have to show, may not show everything, but if you can give a bit more context, that can help the reviewer to see some of those other ways that you're thinking as well, and to really demonstrate your abilities the best.
Thanks, Katrina. And finally, Prachista.
I think really important to know what the program is about, and that's partially what information is available on the university website, but also having contact with alumni and people who are associated with the program. You're putting in a lot of time and effort into this application, so make sure it is the program that is the best suited for you.
Right. Thank you so much, everybody, for all your advice today. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. But as I've said, there are so many other resources that you can consult, and I'm sure you'll have your questions answered there. And we will also be in touch. We've received several links from some of our panelists today that we will be forwarding to people who have registered. So you will have access to that too. And then finally, just to say thank you to our panelists today, and thank you to everybody who's joined us. Have a good evening.